All right, this is going to be fun. So as Annalise said, we are in the middle of a series where we're talking about the parables that Jesus told. He was the master storyteller. He loved telling stories. And he used these stories to shine a spotlight, like right deep down into the minds and the hearts of the people that he was talking to. And the parable that we're going to look at this morning is no exception to that. In fact, the parable we're going to look at, I think, is the cleverest parable that Jesus told. It's certainly one of the most interesting, and he really has fun with it because it's full of irony and tongue-in-cheek, and then he has a great twist in the ending of the parable, as we'll see. It's the parable of the shrewd manager. And it's from Luke chapter 16. Just a little word of warning though, we are going to have to do some real work to bury into it, to understand what Jesus is and isn't saying, because of that irony and because of the tongue-in-cheek that sometimes if you read it through a little bit quickly, you might miss. So we're going to really unpack it as we go. Okay? You ready? Luke chapter 16. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. Now let's just pause there for a sec. So in this made-up story, we have a rich man who's appointed a manager to take care of all his affairs. He was supposed to take care of all the assets, all the properties, all his income, manage his entire household. So this manager's got a real position of trust and responsibility. It's like the rich man has handed over his passwords and the bank account access to the manager. But then the rich man hears these whispers that his manager's not doing a very good job. He's not dishonest yet, we'll get there. He's just lazy. Wasteful, selfish. He's just not doing a good job managing the rich man's affairs. Okay. So the rich man calls the manager in and asks him, "What's this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you can no longer be my manager." The rich man confronts him and says, "You're fired. You're not representing me well. You're being lazy and wasteful in the position and the opportunities that I've given you. But not so fast, because I know employment law, and you've got a notice period. And I'm going to make you work out that notice period. And during that time, you're going to get together my accounts. You're going to build the books. You're going to get all the records together to show me exactly what you've done. And then you're out." Right? So the manager says to himself, "What shall I do now? My manager is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg." So the manager's panicked. He's been caught lazing on the job, and he realizes he's about to become unemployed. And then a second thing dawns on him. Not only is he unemployed, but he's not going to be able to get another job. No one's going to hire this guy who's just been fired. He's been publicly tarnished. And he can't dig. You know, he's an inside sort of a guy. You know, he has lovely soft palms and manicured fingernails, right? He can touch type, you know, but he doesn't know which end of a shovel does what. In his family, probably a little bit like mine, his wife owns all the tools, right? And look, if he was around yesterday, but to serve, there is no way he would have been with the DIY dads, right? Because, kind of like me, when you're around men who actually know how to swing a hammer, it's just a little bit intimidating, right? So there's C3 Cares coordinator. So next year I'm going to lobby for a new project. We can still have the DIY dads and the Reviolette Clean and the packing hampers. That's all great. But then we're going to have a new project, something like for men who love to type. All right? So that's this guy here, right? And that panic is enough to spring this manager into action. He's like, right, I've been given a short window of time and opportunity to do something about my future job prospects. And he comes up with a plan. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their homes. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, "How much do you owe my master?" 900 gallons of olive oil, he said. The manager told him, "Take your bill, write it down quickly, make it 450. Then he asked the second, "How much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he says. He told him, "Take your bill, make it 800. So the manager kicks off his plan. And of course, the debtors think, this is great. I'm getting a huge discount here. Awesome, I'll take it. Thank you. My new best friend. If you ever need anything, you call me and let me know." And then the manager says, "Well, thank you. I may just do that. Sooner rather than later, in fact." So the manager gives out these massive discounts to all his master's debtors in order for them to owe him one. He's buying favours for him future using his master's money. So clearly now he's gone from merely just lazy to blatantly dishonest. And at this point of the story, the crowd is leaning in a little bit because we all love it to understand how the villain pulls off his crimes, right? We have genres of those movies. But then in Hollywood style, we also like it when at the end of the movie, the villain gets what they deserve. And so the crowd's expecting this. They're thinking, this manager's about to get roasted. He's going to jail for fraud. And then Jesus is going to make the point that we should all work hard and be honest. But Jesus is the master storyteller. And he twists the story around completely to make everyone lean in a little bit more and really listen to what he's saying. So this is how he concludes the parable. Then the master commended the dishonest manager because he'd acted shrewdly. So the rich man in the story laughs out loud. He's like, you got me. Now that your backside's on the line, you've pulled your finger out and you've stopped being lazy. You're using your last few days of this job to secure yourself another job. You're using this short window of time and opportunity to look after your future. Finally, you're thinking ahead. Finally, you're acting shrewdly. So clearly the rich man wasn't actually that worried about being ripped off. He's more actually just enjoying the irony here. That this manager of his has stopped being lazy and wasteful of the opportunities and is being shrewd. Now, Jesus steps out of the story and then he tells us the point that he wants to make. But before we go there, I just want to drill down a little bit more on shrewd. What does shrewd mean? The word that's translated shrewd here, it's actually used a few other times throughout the New Testament by Jesus when he tells other parables. But in all of those other parables, it's translated not shrewd, but wise. It's exactly the same word. And we associate, with the word shrewd, some sort of a sneakiness, an underhandedness, a dishonesty, just like the manager, right? So that's why I think the translators chose the word shrewd in this exact story. But really interestingly, Jesus used this same word shrewd in those other parables, but translated wise in our English version. So it's the same word wise as in the wise man who built his house on a rock foundation, not on soft sand. And the same word wise for the wise servant who was ready when his master arrived home late. And the 5 wise bridesmaids who had extra oil burning in their lamps, so when the groom was late, they were still being faithful to their job. And there's no negative connotation in any of those other parables about this word, wise. So the actual underlying word itself means to be smart, thoughtful, discerning, forward-looking. It's sort of a practical wisdom word. Like, if you realize you do A, you're gonna get B. It's about being deliberate about the outcome that you want. And in Jesus' stories, how to get a house that doesn't fall down, how to not look stupid if someone important is running late, how to get a new job if you're about to lose this one. It's about having a deliberate eye on what I want in the future and doing what's needed now in order to get there. So in this parable, the manager is praised for being shrewd about his future. Now, I'd like to ask you to do a quick mental exercise, because if that's shrewd, what would be the opposite of shrewd and wise and forward thinking? What would be anti-shrewd? I think it's simply acting without thinking. So let me illustrate for you what acting without thinking or anti-shrewd is. Take a step back with me to those wonderful years of the 90s.
I haven't been outside that much in the last couple of weeks.
Oh yeah? Why not?
There's been some family problems. But I don't want to bore you with those.
Thanks. Oh, look, Frost.
Harry? Are you okay?
Oh yeah, I get do this all the time.
Mr. Anti-Shrewd right there. Dumber than dumb, not thinking about the future, not thinking that if you do A, you're going to get B. So all of that is what shrewd means. Let's now come and have a look at, continue reading and see what Jesus draws out of the parable. But remember one thing, remember he's having fun with the story. And he doesn't want the people who he's telling the story to copy the actions of the characters. Instead, he gets out that spotlight and he shines it deep inside to their motivations and their attitudes. And that's where the lesson is. And in this case, he shines his spotlight not on the laziness of the manager at the start and not on the dishonesty of the manager at the end, but on his shrewdness. Okay. Then Jesus said, "For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light." So when explaining the parable, the first thing that he says is that street smart, non-religious types, they know how to get what they want. They know how to look after themselves. They know how to think things through. They know how to look after their future. And you, my followers, need to know how to think things through too. You need to think about your futures. You should be shrewd like the manager. Goes on. "I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's all gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal homes." Now, here's the tongue-in-cheek, right? You've got to get the tongue-in-cheek in what he's saying here, because he's referring back to what the manager did in buying friends for himself. And he's not saying that his followers should literally go and buy friends, or that they can actually buy a ticket to heaven somehow. That's not what he's saying. He's saying we should emulate the shrewdness of the manager in being conscious of his future and then acting accordingly. And the future that he's talking about here is an eternal future. And the friends he's talking about are eternal friends. And who is the eternal friend? He's talking about God, our Father in heaven himself. He's drawing a spiritual parallel here. He's saying that we should not be lazy with this life that we've been given, but rather, because we've been given a short window of time and opportunity, like the manager was, that is our chance to use our resources and our position to influence our future. And then when it comes to our spiritual life, our ultimate futures, that we should be just as forward-looking and deliberate and wise and smart and use our worldly wealth, our life in this world, in light of our eternal future. And if what Jesus taught about this life being followed by another life is true, then to simply not think about our future is anti-shrewd, right? Not in our best interests. To not think about our ultimate future is like licking a frozen metal pole. Right? Just dumb. Jesus is saying we should be shrewd towards God, to be wise in how we think about this life that will soon be gone. And if it will soon be gone, then what would be wise and smart? What would be forward-looking and acting in our own best interest? It would be investing in our eternal home, seeking out an eternal friend, seeking out God himself. I know it might sound a little bit weird to hear a sermon almost a little bit unchristian about self-interest. You know, how many preachers get up and say, act in your own self-interest? Well, that is what I'm saying today. Because if the shrewd manager was praised for putting effort into working so hard to secure his future, then shouldn't we think about how hard we are working and looking for our future? That's exactly the message of this parable right here. Shrewd and wise towards God, towards our eternal home and future. And then Jesus goes on further, and he talks about being shrewd with money specifically. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with somebody else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. There is so much challenging stuff in that. So much about how money is a test of our faithfulness. But I just want to focus on what's the heart of it. What is being shrewd with money? It's ensuring you don't fall in love with it. Jesus is really, really clear here. We cannot be shrewd towards God and love money. It's just simply not in our best interests to fall in love with worldly wealth. That's anti-shrewd. Years before this story, the richest man in the ancient world said this about money: "He who loves silver will never be satisfied with silver." Or in another translation, those that love money will never have enough. Money creates this insatiable appetite for more and more of itself. Let me tell you a quick story. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about his experiences of growing up in Zimbabwe when they had massive inflation and huge turmoil in their economy. And we have a little bit of inflation here in Australia now, but nothing like what he experienced growing up. Because inflation got so bad over there that shops would raise prices twice a day. First thing in the morning and then after lunch. First thing in the morning and then after lunch. And the money just got worth so little over time that the government had to start printing $1 million notes. And I've got one here, actually. If you've ever wondered what $1 million looks like, that's it. I'll show you up on screen so you can see it a bit more clearly. So, $1 million note. But then inflation got worse. And it spiraled even more out of control. And the government had to keep printing more larger banknotes, right up to this one. $100 trillion. It was real money, not monopoly money, real money. And this caused so much human tragedy. But then it got even worse. Can you imagine? That's walking to the shop of a morning. And then you need 2 wheelbarrows in the afternoon. Now hold that image in mind and let's go back to what Jesus said. He talks about a different kind of money. Not worldly wealth, but true riches. Not the kind of money that creates an insatiable appetite for more and more of itself. And not the kind of money that can be inflated away to being worth nothing. He talks about money from an eternal country. And if that money is real, true riches, then how could it ever be in our best interest to fall in love with the flimsy money in our world? Another time, Jesus encouraged his followers to store up treasures in heaven. He's saying exactly the same thing here. It's being smart about our future. Using your money now in such a way that one day our Father in heaven will welcome us as good and faithful stewards, as being wise and shrewd with money. So let's get practical now and come back to that sense of being shrewd towards God. How can we be wise and forward-thinking towards God himself? I think it starts by making time for him in our busy lives. Nurturing our spiritual selves just doesn't happen automatically by osmosis. We benefit when we prioritize making time to turn our hearts to Him for connection and rest. Society might call this self-care. I think Jesus would just call it smart, wise, being shrewd towards God, acting in my best interests, thinking of my eternal future. Because jam-packing our schedules with too much stuff to do and so much pressure that we crowd out and suffocate our souls, it's just not smart. It's just not wise. It's just not shrewd. Ironically, being busy can be the ultimate lazy if we're lazy about what really matters, the state of our souls. We need to create room for God and deliberately plan unhurried time to connect with Him. And not doing this just isn't not in our best interest. It's just like licking a frozen pole and wondering why we get stuck. Now, I've been challenged a lot about this over the last couple of years as I realized that I was losing part of my soul and my identity to my work. And since then, I've had to shake up my rhythms and patterns a lot to be more shrewd towards God, to be more deliberate with making time to connect, to pray, to reflect, to think about my spiritual life and my spiritual home. And is that hard for me to do? Ironically, yes. And it really shouldn't be, because it's in my best interests. And I'm actually quite good at my own best interests. You could ask my wife. But that's exactly the reason why Jesus told this parable. Exactly the reason, because He knows we can lose sight of what really matters and we can shoot ourselves in the foot. And that's why I wanted to talk about this parable today, is because I need this message every day. I need to remember to prioritize what really matters. I need to never forget the pitfall of falling in love with the money that I work with every day. And I need to act on what's really in my best interests. And so let me ask you this morning, are you being shrewd towards God? Are you being smart and acting in your own best interests? With your money, with your time, with the schedule, with your energies, with your soul? Have you given Him the place of no rival, no equal? Can I encourage you to do something practical? Schedule a time in your calendar. Write yourself a note. Send yourself an email. Do whatever would prompt you to think about how you need to make the most of this little bit of time and this little bit of opportunity that you've been given to change your future. And consider where you're being anti-shrewd. What habits have you developed? What situations do you get yourself into? What unhelpful thought patterns, what attitudes towards God or money are not serving you well? And if you just thought of something right then, that's probably what it is. And if that's the case, decide to deal with it in this little window of time and opportunity that you've been given. And remember, you cannot be shrewd towards God and your future if you fall in love with money. Instead, Jesus would say, be wise, be smart, be forward-looking, and be deliberate about your best interests by looking after your ultimate future.